All right. Thank you all for coming. My name is John Bannister. My co-organizer, Trevor, our other co-organizer is Ed. He's not going to be here this evening. It doesn't sound like. But Trevor is giving a presentation tonight, which I'm going to let him talk about in here in just a minute. But I just want to let everybody know we're part of Denver Agile, or Agile Denver, sorry, Agile Denver. And Agile Denver will be doing some meetups throughout, in-person meetups throughout the year. They're still working on the details, but the last meeting I was at, that is something that they're going to initiate. They are not doing a conference, our big conference in the spring. So that'll be put off. So they're going to do smaller in-person events. Again, I don't know what those formats of those events will be, but that's just a heads up to everybody else. That being said, does anybody else have any Agile Denver or announcements we need to make before I turn it over to Trevor? Okay. All right. Take it away, Trevor, please.
All right. Well, thank you, John. The first thing I wanted to say for this presentation as just a warning to folks, this is not a presentation with a destination at the end. We're not going to get to anywhere, but it's more about the journey we take together as we talk through all of this. And nothing that I'm going to say here is meant to imply that one of these scaling methods is better than the other. This is really just intended to be kind of what was interesting to me. I was digging into these again and started to kind of see that while they all are mentioning lean and working off of lean, there's variations and differences in how they actually approach this and what they actually do. So that's kind of more of what this was intended is. Lean can be very broad, and these things are approaching them in different ways, and we can have some discussion as we go of how well that may work out or not. But I just wanted to keep that in mind for everybody. Exactly, Dan. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Oh, can you enable screen sharing for me, John, please?
All right. Can you do? You should be able to share now.
Now I can share.
Okay.
Let me share this. And let's kick off the slideshow. Hey, look at that. Pretty graphics even. So this is about scaling agile and lean leadership. And please interrupt, ask questions, make comments as we're going. This is not a formal, you must listen to me for the entire time and then questions at the end. I want this to be interactive and discussion as we go. So let's just start with some very basic things here, just in case others aren't aware. So what is lean? Lean comes from Toyota. It's also known as the Toyota Way or the Toyota Production System, or maybe should have been named the Toyota Process Development System. I think the core members may remember that from the video that we watched a little while ago. And I like that description maybe the best for what lean is actually doing. I also want you to think of the context for lean here for the Toyota production system. It's for manufacturing, and it actually started with weaving looms back in the late 1800s that were automated to deal with problems. If the thread broke, they would automatically stop instead of going on. And that mentality of, automatically responding to problems continued on even as Toyota moved into automobiles. And this is therefore covering from the 1800s. Most of the things we talk about in lean and Toyota come from the 40s, 50s. So I want you also to keep that in mind, that this is talking about Japan in the post-World War II era. And that's something else to keep in mind as we're talking through this and thinking about what they were doing with lean. Is a lot of this was a response to the fact that they did not have the capital or the people available to them in the numbers and the size that they may have wanted to do these things. So they had to operate in this kind of fashion because of that environment. So that's a thing to keep in mind as we talk through this. I think of my context, I work for Charter Communications, the very large cable company. Our problem is not lack of people, lack of financial resources. It goes the other way, that we sometimes have too much. So it takes away a lot of that pressure that they felt that caused them to have these ideas in lean. The other thing to note is, while we talk about lean as a sort of monolithic thing, it actually is, because of this context, often split to lean manufacturing versus lean software development. And those contexts, while may be able to use similar tools or the same tools, will often require different tools or different ideas as they go. And we'll see some of that as we see how some of these scaling methodologies talk about lean. Any questions about Toyota production system, lean, anything else anybody would want to add for this very brief description of what is lean? Oh, Dan came off mute. Did you have something, Dan?
I was going to say a way of thinking or a mindset.
Yes. Yes, very much so. That's what we will see here as we go through in more detail. So often when they talk about lean, they use the metaphor of a house here. And in fact, they had two houses, and some of what we might talk about here is how these two houses kind of go together, even though they may not seem to at the start. I mean, they both have the same roof with maybe a little extra added there of highest quality, lowest cost, shortest lead times. And then the Toyota Way one adds best safety, highest morale. It's when you get down to the pillars here that it's different. So as you see, the one on the left is talking about judoka, which is, and I'm going to butcher the word, but automation with a human touch is how they often talk about, translating that. They also use the phrase automation to kind of indicate that. And it's talking about automating the machines on the assembly line for the cars. And that what you really need is an expert in the process to come and build that machine so that it is really just when you are ready, you push the button and it goes. And it stops automatically for problems and all of that stuff that they had from the weaving and that sort of thing. The other pillar here being just in time, where they talk about continuous flow and the pull system. If we look at the Toyota Way one, the pillars are respect for people, continuous improvement. Is there a way to maybe bring these together in this? Are they really two separate houses here? Not rhetorical.
Well, I don't think so. In particular, when I look at Jacoda and like stop and notify of abnormalities and separate human work and machine work, that to me lines up pretty well with respect for people, because you can't, like, I can't feel safe to stop and notify someone of abnormalities if I don't feel safe and feel respected. And then also like separate. This makes me think of DevOps and the idea of reducing toil. And like what can be automated and what should people not do for the separating human work and machine work, which I also think is foundationally based on respect for not doing like garbage work over and over.
All right, thank you, Ed, and welcome. How about continuous improvement to just in time then?
Well, I mean, it is continuous flow and a pull system, which enables an approach for continuous improvement. So,
and some of it may also come from that lower part, because notice that the base on the one on the left there is Kaizen, which is continuous improvement, and Haijunka, which is leveling. sort of smoothing your flow, smoothing the overburden and all of that in there. And then it's all based on stability on the one on the left, and then learning cycles on the right. The PDA, plan, do, check, adjust. Ha, I remembered. Take that. And that may seem like it doesn't go together, stability on the left and learning cycles on the right, but I think they actually do go together here. When what you realize is you have to have a stable system in order to be able to do the experiments on top of it. If your system is changing willy-nilly underneath you all the time and you do an experiment, you can't tell if the experiment made the adjustment or if something else made the adjustment. So even though those may seem like contradictory from an initial view, I think they actually do go together. Any other thoughts on these two houses? We'll skip along then. So then they have since come up with the lean thinking house here, continuing that house metaphor, where you see it's again respect for people, continuous improvement. The roof is still the same there, best quality and value to people, society, all of that. The base has changed a little bit from that plan, do, act, etc. Plan, do, adjust. But it's now management applies and teaches lean thinking and bases decisions on this long-term philosophy. And this is the theme I kind of wanted to continue throughout tonight, is that base now of managers in this model being teachers and working to make sure that we all follow this philosophy, because that's the thread I think that continues through a lot of lean and that we would want to look at. And they've also added in here the 14 principles in product development. We'll go into those in more detail on the next slide. But is there anything, as you look at these pillars of respect for people, continuous improvement, surprising, different, maybe not what you would expect?
I kind of want to know what they mean, or what the thinking was behind the "don't trouble your customer."
Respect for people for them actually went beyond just the people employed by the company. The idea is it's respect for everyone involved in the system, the people, the management, the customers even. And it's don't make it a burden to get your product. Don't make your product a burden to them. And that was something they wanted to keep mindful of, is respect for people covers not just the company, it covers your vendors as well, which is why it says build partners with stable relationships and coaching.
I could see that one potentially getting misinterpreted in some contexts where it's like, well, I don't want to bother them, so I'm not going to, or I don't want to consume their time, so I'm not going to ask them questions. That might be the anti-pattern version of that.
Yes. Yeah. So that's some of why a lot of this is based off of management is there to apply that sort of long-term thinking on this as well.
I think it's interesting that they say no wasteful work, because if we're going to be experimenting, sometimes we don't know what we don't know, and the experiment shows us that we were going down the wrong path, right? I'd prefer them to say minimize wasteful or something like that, right? Because I don't want to hinder people going, well, I'm not going to do the experiment unless I'm absolutely sure it's going to work.
Yeah, and
the purpose of experimenting.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing here, because remember, again, this is also in the context of manufacturing. And the idea behind the no wasteful work is don't make the workers do the overburden, oh, help me out, Dan, what's the lean wastes? Mura is the Japanese.
Right. Okay.
So the experimentation is expected as part of that. And that's why the continuous improvement is the other pillar, is we should always be looking at how we get better as part of this. And it's not that continuous improvement is handed from management. We'll see that more, but this is meant to be everybody is learning how to improve and offering how they may improve. Again, back to post-World War II Japan, they didn't have the manpower to have entire teams dedicated to just research and development, for example, and waiting for the research and development people to get done so that they could take 24 months to build a car and get money from it. It's all about getting money faster. But thank you for the comments, Kim and Ed. Let's look at those 14 principles in just a little more detail here. And there's a few that I wanted to kind of pull out here. I'm not going to read them all. You can read faster than I'll read them to you with my voice. But the one I wanted to focus a little bit more on is, again, I'm looking at this from the concept of how management is treated in these scaling methodologies and how management is treated here in Lean. So there's a few things here that I would point to of, like number 5 there, build a culture of stopping and fixing problems to ultimately build quality and teach everyone to methodically study problems. There's a lot of this repeated throughout here. Grow leaders from within who thoroughly understand the work, live the philosophy, and teach it to others. The quote that comes here is, "My manager can do my job better than me." They are lean thinking manager teachers. It's not the manager's role to tell people what to do. It is the manager's role to teach them how to find ways of solutions to their problems and how to even see that there is a problem to begin with. One of the quotes that's always stuck with me is, the managers should be encouraging everyone to have eyes for waste in the system. And it's a lot of talk about making sure you're all taking that systems view, the systems thinking of that. And that goes into number 10, develop exceptional people and teams who follow your company's philosophy. And then again, talking about the vendors in number 11 there and having them in that same idea. And then number 14, I think, is really the one that you'll see repeated a lot, especially in the way we talk in these scaling methodologies. Become and sustain a learning organization through relentless reflection and Kaizen. So if that's the principles for the lean here, they've also got this idea of the lean product development in that house. And the idea here is we're increasing the value of the information created and lowering the cost of creating that knowledge. I threw this one in for Frank from his comments for in our chat, but it was there. It's true. This is a lot of what we're trying to do here, is out-learning the competition, learning faster, improving faster, all of that. So that's kind of what's hidden in that lean product development piece in the house. Any comments on this slide? Anything that's jumping out to you? Pretty straightforward then. All right, that's fine too. So what does leadership look like in Lean? We've seen it kind of repeated there in the principles. We kind of got it there in that product development, but here's a few quotes that I wanted to pull out of this. And it's that there is no magic method here. It's not a series of tools and practices that you can just jump in and apply willy-nilly. It's an entire system, and it's really about human ability. It's about generating that human capital in your company. And you can see that again then in talking about, it's about this idea of continuous improvement, called that culture that's part of this. And it's about going to see where the work is done, the Gemba. That's where the work happens. Does this resonate for people on ideas that you've heard? It should sound vaguely Agile-ish.
I'm just reflecting that my brain is jumping to, being a coach and a consultant of this is a big leap in a paradigm shift on how leaders function.
Mhm.
And the challenge to help them see the benefit. And then once they see there's benefit, then the challenge to help them traverse that chasm that it is.
That's a lot of that last article there that I've linked, is how they had to shift their mindset from the standardized way that they were taught that management works to this different way of thinking of, it's not just that you go see the problem and say, here's what we're going to do about it. It's about, here's where I go see the problem. Let's talk about what's really causing it. And now how do we solve it? It's about bringing not solutions to your people, but bringing challenges to your people. And that's a hard shift for a lot of folks who often come to management out of technical, where they are the problem solver, especially.
Yeah, I think it's really about collaboration, Trevor, is what they're trying to do. And you've heard me say this many times, and I'm sure other folks have too. The main difference that I describe traditional project management or waterfall versus Agile is, in Agile, we ask, we don't tell. And that's the main difference, in my opinion. And in all the business schools, they're taught traditional project management and basically being the expert and really, being the boss and telling people what to do versus asking and collaborating. I think that's changing now with Agile and some more modern types of methodologies and philosophies. But again, it really comes down to the culture and really the acceptance of certain people in some of these organizations to adapt new ways of thinking. And not that this isn't super new. We talked about this going on since the 50s, 40s. Agile's been around, the manifesto's been around for 22 years. But again, some of these larger companies, and you and I have both worked for them, you can definitely see it. And I think everybody on this call has probably worked for a big company. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Why, John, you eventually got where I was starting to, I looked it up. The Toyota Way, this book was published in 2003. And the quote that you picked, Trevor, says, after studying for almost 20 years, it's almost sinking in. So presumably he's referring to from, like 1980 or so, for when he wrote this book. But it's now been 20 more years almost since this book was written. And even if this was 1980 when he was thinking of this, I mean, Toyota started doing it in like the 70s, like that's when it kind of started. Why? I don't know if I take John, like what John put as a basic assumption was like, well, they teach it. Why isn't it any different now after it's been 40 years or 50 years? And a lot of these concepts are in every magazine that an executive reads, and they're every single book that these same people read and post about on LinkedIn, and it's every conversation that they have. But then I know like the management 3.0 concept, they call that management 2.0, right? Where they would say 1.0 is scientific management and all of that junk that came with it, and 3.0 is like what John was talking about, like, hey, we're going to collaborate, we're going to like ideate together, and we're going to like, how do I delegate work to you? I'm not going to just delegate. We're going to like decide how, what me as the manager owns and what you as the team own. And, we're going to do all of that stuff. And they say 2.0 is the one in between, where they read the
Mhm.
books, but they still think that they're the smartest people in the room and they're going to tell everybody what to do. Like, what? I had this conversation actually earlier today with someone, and I don't know why people look at Toyota, they talk about it all the time.
Mhm.
Oh, how great they are. And then nobody, it's not even that people don't do it. It's like a lot of people don't even try
Mhm.
to do it.
Mhm. Well, some of this to think about here, and I didn't include it here, but what I should probably link afterwards for you, Ed, is Larman's 4 or 5, I think 5 now, laws of organizational behavior from large scale Scrum, where he talks about some of that. But what I think some of it you're seeing here is, remember, we were talking about this, that this is a cultural shift as well that is needed. So you have to shift the culture of a company to be able to do this effectively. And that is a hard shift, as Kim was alluding to. You have to shift the management behaviors as part of that. We know how easy it is to get them to actually even show up to a meeting sometimes.
Or they need to retire.
Or they need to retire. Yes.
Which I think is happening in your company.
It is. It is. So we'll see what happens with that.
I'm wondering, Ed, also, and everyone, another thing that I found helpful in understanding these kinds of things, as well as others, is Lalou's book, Reinventing Organizations, based on spiral dynamics of the actual organizational evolution, right? So people in a certain level of their organizational evolution as a leader, because you have it as a leader as well as your group, this would be very foreign and uncomfortable and like, no way in hell am I going to do this kind of thing. And they're not there yet, kind of thing. As well as I really like, I don't know how to pronounce Michelle's last name, Michelle Sliger. You know, she talks about a lot of leaders, one, they'll either just like discount this kind of thing altogether because, you know, I've been doing whatever for decades, so I'm not going to listen to the new flavor of the week. Other ones who actually go like, yeah, this sounds great, but I'm really close to retirement. Like they won't acknowledge this verbally, but really close to retirement, don't want to jeopardize that, don't want to jeopardize all their bonuses and everything like that to try something new where they could fail. And their career ends sooner than they want it to, as well as without all their bonuses. So like there's a lot of that. And I see that. My hope, and maybe it's Pollyanna-ish, an ideal, I don't know, is that I find more mid-level leadership willing to try these things, and eventually they will be the leaders. So like, hopefully it'll happen that way. I think like John was saying, as people retire, the shift might happen more quickly, but enough said.
I was going to say one of the other things in large scale Scrum, the first thing that he did in the training when I had it with Craig in 2015 was talk about cognitive biases. And Erica Lenz shared a really nice thing that she found that listed them all out, that circle. Yeah, John's seen it. And I should try to find that again too, but that's something else going on here in a lot of cases. I think, Ed, you would know this story of when the leaders and managers of the American car plants and manufacturers went over to Japan to see what Toyota was doing. They thought they were being shown a demonstration, not a real factory, because they couldn't even comprehend how a factory could work like that.
Yeah, now you've got BMW doing like, I remember at a conference a few years ago, I think it was Mick Kirsten who wrote that Project to Product book, was talking about his work with BMW, and they've actually set up their assembly line. Like they constructed a building, or they reconstructed the renovated it so that the assembly lines are like pivotable or whatever, so that you can instantly decide to change from, you know, whatever one base to another, and take part of it offline while you're still like to help with the dyes or whatever. Like they have to swap all the stuff out, and also to help with like and-on cord type stuff, and then also to give them agility so that if they start getting more orders for something else, they can pivot their assembly line like really quickly to respond to that.
Awesome. Yeah, and I've read about that as well. In fact, I was reading an interesting one. I think the case study was BMW. I'll have to look again and see. All right. So lots to unpack here, obviously, as we're thinking about this. But keep this in mind. This is how Lean is talking about leadership and what it should look like for them. I'm going to commit heresy here at the Kanban community of practice and talk about Scrum for a moment. Since we're going to talk skill, I know. Since we're going to
Scrum
talk
versus Lean.
no,
versus
no,
Kanban?
no.
That's the heresy.
Oh, I know.
That's
We're not
the
going to
heresy.
we're not going to cover that heresy this time. We have to talk about Scrum a little bit because most of these scaling methodologies are based off of Scrum at their foundation. So I went back and looked at the Scrum guide for 2020, and they talk about lean thinking is about reducing waste and focusing on the essentials. Okay. Many people talk that you shouldn't reduce lean to just talking about waste and such, but that's fine. I then went back to the new product development game, and I want you to all keep in mind the name Nonaka, because for the core members, most of you probably have seen Frank at least talk about the article about tacit knowledge versus implicit knowledge that Nonaka wrote a while before this article. But they talk about the 6 characteristics to their method of the new product development game. Again, 1986 we're talking about here. They didn't talk about Toyota. They talked about Honda and Canon and a few others here. But it's built-in instability, self-organizing project teams, overlapping development phases, multi-learning, and that means learning at the individual manager team level, but also covers learning different skills within your team as well. So even though I'm a developer, I might go and learn how to do UI, UX, that kind of thing. Subtle control, this is talking about how management can still bring control, but most of what they should be doing is basically leading to autonomy in the self-organizing teams. One of the quotes there was, "We're there to provide the money and keep our mouths shut," as management, but still providing some guidance. And then the organizational transfer of learning is part of this as well. So it's lean adjacent, similar ideas, not lean directly. But we're probably not too far off. And another interesting discussion we might go into later is, as a separate topic, is how does lean influence Scrum and all of these things we see there. I mean, you've got several of these. If we go back to the 14 principles, there's many of the same things here, just phrased differently. But let's talk about the scaling methods. In case you're not aware of them, I'm going to just show them very briefly here and kind of talk about how they approach management from what I could find quickly. So Nexus and Scrum at Scale are done by, Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland. So Ken does Nexus, Jeff does Scrum at Scale. Both of them, if you're not aware, are the ones that made Scrum. So this is basically Scrum with some add-ons. So you can see that Nexus is Scrum with a couple extra teams and a Nexus integration team as their special edition. Scrum at Scale is fractal Scrum. It's Scrum all the way down. Neither really goes into any detail about management or leadership as part of this. It really is just much like the Scrum guide. Here's the guide to do Nexus. Here's the guide to do Scrum at Scale. And they really stick to their areas there. The only thing that really is mentioned there is that EAT in the middle there, the executive action team. And they're treated as a Scrum master for the whole system. It's a team of executives that are there to help remove impediments, do some coaching, do some facilitating, all of that sort of work. So it kind of gets that idea of leadership as a coach, a trainer, but it's more from the point of view of just as a Scrum master view of it. So there's not a lot going on here, but they're here. There are things that you can do. Disciplined Agile, or DAD, disciplined Agile delivery, comes from PMI and is, in the words of one of my friends at work now, a choose
Trevor?
your, yeah.
I see a hand up.
Oh, sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so just a question on that. So the EAT would, because you were saying like they're kind of like a scrum master for the whole system. So are they kind of like release train engineers? Like with that, I mean,
You might be able to kind of consider them sort of release trained engineers. It's not even that level. It's really executives that are there to try to solve company level problems and impediments for the team.
okay, and they're and they are considered a part of the scrum team.
Yeah, they're kind of there as their own thing in the middle. I haven't delved into Scrum at Scale in great detail, but yeah.
I think they'd be part of the Scrum at Scale team, but like if you look at this diagram, so if we take the EAT, and let's go to one of the arms off the EAT, it's the Scrum of Scrums of Scrums, which means if you go a layer deeper to one of those little sets of 5, that is 5 teams having a Scrum of Scrums. So it would, if I was a Scrum Master for a development team, it would be, I would work with my team, then I'd work with I don't know what they call it in Scrum at Scale, but I'd work with that like pod or whatever that's local, that has their own Scrum of Scrums, and then that would scale out to the Scrum of Scrums, which keeping an eye on all of those. So if we were, I actually signed up for SPC training at the end of the year but if we're going to use the terms, which I don't know all the way yet, probably the Scrum of Scrums, if there was a dedicated facilitator for that, that would be most closely matched to a release train engineer. The EATs would be like the, what is that next level up?
Solution train engineer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good analogy. Thank you both, Ed and Trevor.
And just so you know, there you can Google. There's like a 16-page Scrum at Scale thing that will tell you everything you want to know. But the names are very different and very misleading and confusing for everyone else who practices all the other Agile at Scale.
Okay, you mean like okay,
right?
so
Because the Scrum of Scrums in most Agile scaling is we're meeting all together, whereas this is a totally different meeting, right? But so you can read the 16-page document and go, oh, okay. And then go from there. So,
and just a note, I'll share around this PowerPoint afterwards as well, and these all link to the various pages where you can find out more about these. And this links to the page where you can read the online guide for Scrum at Scale. You can read the online Nexus guide and all of that if you want to dig into more detail on any of this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we'll post in the comments on the Meetup site.
Just moving along here to Disciplined Agile. This is Disciplined Agile, or DAD, because it's Disciplined Agile Delivery sometimes, and there's a couple other names as well. This is PMI's attempt at scaling, and like I was saying, my friend describes this as choose your own adventure scaling. You can come in here and they've got all these things called blades where you can pick and choose and decide which ones you need for your context. So very context driven, so good from that point of view.
I think it's important with DAD, or well, it's not DAD anymore, Disciplined Agile, to mention it is PMI's thing, but only because they acquired it. It was not theirs originally. I think that is a distinction. So it might still have value, possibly.
Well, I think I've heard that the acquirees have since left as well. But anyway, we're not here to judge. We're here to talk about how they approach this. So I found this interesting quote in the middle here where they talk about this. And what they're talking about here is Nonaka's vision of middle management, where he, in his article previously that I referenced, that I didn't link here, but we can as well if I can find the link again, referenced tacit knowledge versus implicit knowledge. And his idea of middle management is they are the translation layer between, the strategy and the business layer, and then the actual teams doing the work. So that's a lot of how he sees management filling this, is it's kind of a translation. Part of it is, getting that translation, getting the middle management to talk about, here's the strategy, here's what the teams are doing. So would you consider that the same as, that lean trainer management idea? Is this adjacent? Is this separate?
Doesn't look very lean from the picture.
Ignore their picture there. It's a little lean in that you can pick and choose, and it says lean right at the bottom there.
Oh, we just have to use the
Well,
word.
then it really is lean.
I'm looking more at Nonaka's idea here of the middle up down management and how that might compare to that idea of the lean idea of a manager teacher.
To me, it's still, command and control, hierarchies. This doesn't look anything different than the tree diagram, maybe slightly, but not by much. But that, again, it's PMI. We're not here to judge, but I don't know much about this framework, to be honest, but I'm sure there's some adjacency to the other frameworks, but it's still very top loaded down. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I can certainly see that. I think the thing that's missing for me is it doesn't really show what the interaction modes are between the people, and without that, it's hard to understand how, whether it's you've got egalitarian interaction modes, whether there's a lot of freedom to have agency and lots of bidirectional communication. It's hard to really get that from a diagram like this. And I think that's kind of key to understand how all those interactions really take place, to know whether or not you've got a culture that aligns to that middle manager teacher guide kind of pattern, or something completely different, right?
And I think some of that also comes from this being a pick and choose methodology as well. They're not here necessarily to dictate that you follow the culture one way or the other. They're here to dictate, to say, here's a blade you can use to fit into your process. If we move on then to large scale Scrum, they're very explicit on the role of the manager in here. And I think you can see from that description on the right there, also from the fact that most of the articles and things and quotes I linked from Lean, I stole directly from their site right here that says Lean Thinking on the left. They are very heavy onto the lean side here. You can see they've got the systems thinking, they've got continuous improvement, they've got go see as you go around here. As for how less itself works, it's right there in the middle of, it's basically Scrum, and it's up to the teams and everybody to decide how they do it. They're very light on rules. It's only like 28 rules that you must follow to do this, with things like you must have a Scrum Master being like one of the rules. And it's more about, this is a barely sufficient framework to get you started. And then their second book was 500 experiments you could do while, doing this framework. And it's really intended to be this experimental mindset.
I'm sorry, did you say 500?
500.
And 28.
Yeah, 28 rules that you must follow.
Only.
They give you.
Only 28. For
Only
you
28.
Today only.
Yeah.
Only 28 rules.
Yeah. It's very, very, very lightweight in terms of this is what you must do.
Do you
But
hear yourself speaking?
Oh, no, I know.
Yeah, Trevor, I can't tell if your sarcasm flag is on or off right now.
It is off. They are very lightweight because, like I said, those rules are things like you must have a scrum master for your team. You must have one and only one product owner for an area.
I see. You mean the rules themselves are very like straightforward
Yes.
and
Yeah.
lightweight.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the 500 is for experiments. It's not 500.
Yes.
rules.
Yes.
Yeah, just to
The
clarify.
500 are things you may or may not want to try for your context. And it is up to you to determine what you do. And many of the experiments are literally do this thing, or the next experiment is don't do this thing. So it is very, very much about building it for your context.
It's funny, as you were saying that, it just got me thinking like, well, people don't want to experiment, but
Mhm.
they sure are willing to waste a ton of time and money getting nothing done.
Mhm.
I don't know. You'd probably be better off just experimenting from up front and just planning for that than it's that whole adage of like, but they can't find enough money to do it right, but they can find enough money to do it twice.
Exactly.
All right. Hey, Trevor, I just wanted to let you know.
Yep.
Normally we schedule this till 7 o'clock. I made an error and put it to 8 o'clock. We're welcome if we go long. If anybody wants to drop at 7, just letting you know we have about 10 minutes. But again, I just want to be respectful of everybody's time. We're probably not going to go to 8 o'clock. So I'll let Trevor presentation dictate when we're going to end and leave some time for questions. So thank you, everyone.
Any other questions about less here, large scale Scrum? Then let's get on to the elephant in the room, SAFe, Scaled Agile framework. They have their own view of the lean house, even, where they've added in 2 pillars in the middle. The goal at the top is still the same. The foundation is what they now call lean agile leadership. Thank you for bringing the elephant, Kim. And I think one of the things I would say about SAFe is they definitely try to have an answer for everything. When I first learned of SAFe back in the 2.0 days, I would have said it's very, very, very different to what they have now. They've obviously spent a lot of time and effort, and I suspect a few people here may even know the person that wrote most of their lean section for the website here. Their website has really become, I think, as many people describe it now, a master class in Agile and lean and all of these methodologies. We can debate and talk about whether the framework that itself then supports many of these principles they talk about, but they're at least there and they're trying to get them there. Is there anything different about their house of lean compared to the ones we saw earlier, if you can even remember that far back, or things that you see there that you would kind of hope to see differently?
Well, you already mentioned the 2 added pillars of flow and innovation. Yeah, those are the main ones. And then probably the very top, the goal, the values, slightly different.
And some of it is they seem to have written this more from a software context than a manufacturing context as well. To get to Kim's point of experimentation and feedback is now part of the pillars of the house, even though it was not there to our original discussion. And they talk more about understanding and exploiting variability than removing variability in the flow section. Again, a difference between manufacturing and software contexts. Just to continue on through here, they do have their own, of course, principles here. And I wanted to point these out because these are slightly different, even though lean is in there. They talk about applying systems thinking. One thing that really, the thing that kicked this off for me the most was I was looking at the large scale Scrum site, doing some research again and relearning things, and was looking at the lean wastes there. And then I thought back to all the training I had taken as an SPC, all the trainings I've given within Charter as an SPC or previous to that. I searched the Scaled Agile Framework site. They do not mention the lean wastes anywhere on there. The only thing they really mention is focusing on the reducing of delays. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. It's just something of interest. And what really piqued me to start to put this presentation together and kind of look at how are they approaching this? Because from the original lean, it's not a pillar, but it is a large portion of what they did is you're there to give them, as I said, the eyes for waste. The other one I wanted to look at was number 8, because this is an interesting sort of inversion of the quote we started with. Workers are knowledge workers if they know more about the work they perform than their bosses, from Peter Drucker. But the quote we had originally way back in the lean was, my manager knows more about what I do than I do. So that's an interesting inversion of that idea of the teacher manager here. Can they teach us if they don't know my role as well as I do, or what I know as well as I do? And then, of course, Daniel Pink's autonomy, mastery, purpose is part of this as well.
I think SAFe just like, don't they, I was trying to find the page to pull it up. Don't they just do that thing where they go lean mindset or something at the bottom and just like generically?
Yes. Yeah, and if you click through into that, it's okay. It's good. It's a good content, but I always find their lean agile a little bit fluffy. We'll put it that way. It's more a buzzwordy thing than necessarily there. You have to kind of really dig in to get to the points of, oh yes, they really are talking about these kind of things, but it's an interesting inversion there. Because what I also found is this is not found from the main site. You have to go and actually search for it in Scaled Agile Framework. But they talk about what the actual role of a manager in SAFe is. They're still needed for career development, growing their people. They're freed from managing the work to have time for other activities, including involving into lean thinking manager teachers. That same phrase we started with is repeated here. And then they even talk about managers may become SPCs so that they can continue to train and coach. So it's in there. The idea of managers being part of this and being part of the learning is there. It's just oddly hidden in this. So that's the journey. Like I said, we're not going to reach a destination here. The idea is just kind of to spark discussion, spark ideas. Like I said, this all kicked off for me because I just thought, well, I was reading about the lean wastes again in the context of less. And I was like, I don't remember them in SAFe, and they weren't there. So I was kind of curious then, well, how are they different in how they handle this? And it really jumped to me because of that house of lean picture being repeated throughout here. Kind of made me jump and think, well, what is the role of the manager then in these various methodologies? So I think it comes back to what Kim was really talking about, which is involving leaders and explaining how their role is changing and how their world has to change if they really want to do this. Thinking about, do the lean principles and practices make sense in my context? Because again, we've talked about that a few times. Of this is manufacturing context for that pure lean at the beginning. There's also an entire body of work around lean software development, which talks about how variability is good rather than bad, and is where your innovation comes from. And you may need to think about, am I picking up this practice from manufacturing lean? Am I picking up this practice from software lean? Am I doing manufacturing? Am I doing software? Am I doing something entirely different? And will it make sense in my context? It's not just a tool you can plug and drop in.
Notice you didn't include Lean Six Sigma.
I didn't. The descriptions of Lean Six Sigma that I've usually seen are, it is very much tools and process, and they leave out that entire respect for people pillar as part of it. One thing I didn't, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, something that was standing out to me also was that all of the ones you just showed us that were like closer together, basically. So like what Nexus through Safe are, my perception at least, I know they talk about it, but they are very framework heavy or process heavy or whatever, whereas the, at least the point of the wastes was to create knowledge and teach people how to look for them. Now, whether that's how people treat the wastes now or not, as opposed to just like one more, make sure, check these check boxes to look at them. But the original intent for those was like a mindset thing. And even though they, like all these frameworks and scaled agile, they kind of, oh, well, you have to have the mindset, but it always feels very like, well, you have to do it, but we don't have any actual tips on how to do it. But if you need to know how to plan your program increment and like put a bunch of red rope on a wall to connect a bunch of sticky notes, like we got you.
Everyone gets stock in 3M.
Yeah, and part of that, Ed, may be because you're, as you were saying, you're getting ready to do like SPC for Safe, and Safe is very, very much about the process and the tools. I will say with the less training that I took, the large scale Scrum training was 3 days, 3-day class. 2.5 days were why you would do these things. It was cognitive biases. Why does your system look the way it does? Why would you want to change your system? What are you trying to, do with your system? The last half day was the actual nuts and bolts of doing Safe. And so that's, or Safe, less, excuse me. It's been a long day. It's been a long week. I've been thinking it's Friday like all day because I was thinking Monday was Tuesday. So some of it is not going to be covered in just the glossy, hey, look, here's the picture, 10 seconds I gave each of these things. You really do have to go out and dig and look at these. But hopefully some of these links give you context for that and give you some time, and you may have some time to dig into these. I would encourage that. Less, to me, seems like the one most down this path of lean and lean thinking. Whether that's good or not may depend for your context. Most companies will not do less because of the implication of it is it comes in very hardcore and says you must change your organization to do this. They approach that Kim's problem by coming in and saying you must educate all your executives the same as you educate everybody else. It's going to be a long period. They actually have the kickoff period for less. They call informed consent. You have to, do all these readings, do all this training, do all of this work, and so that you understand what you're being asked to do and why you're being asked to do it, and then you can actually do less.
Has anybody here heard of this, the fluid scaling technology, fast agile?
That's a new one.
So I sat in on
Yes,
a
I
talk.
have.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I've heard this concept not with this name before, not quite with this, but the basic concept is you bring everyone together, you visually represent the business goals on a wall, people self-organize into teams, and then they break down the work and they start doing it, but then on a short cadence. And I mean like every 2 days or every 3 days, you sync back up and repeat those steps. And when you hear that, people go like, they're going to self-organize every 2 or 3 days. And that sounds daunting, but the point is that they probably won't reorganize. Like they will probably just organize back into the exact self-organization that they had until such a point when like a business goal has been met or is no longer the highest priority business goal. And it vaguely reminds me of,
or the work is blocked or abandoned.
Oh, yeah, right. And it vaguely reminds me of, I heard like years ago that, oh, at Microsoft, they do that, like when new projects are starting, they'll bring people together and they'll basically give a presentation, and then whoever wants to do it will jump on that project, and then they repeat that cycle. And I always thought that was such a cool idea. And so I guess people are now doing that in a more comprehensive or complete way with fast agile.
It also involves organization design, depending on the size of your organization. Whether they're calling them collectives now, so a group of team members organized around a portion of the product or value stream, that has, if you have a very large product or you have a large engineering team, you're going to have multiple collectives. You're going to design the organization around functionality or parts of the system that have some form of affinity for one another. Probably have a lot of dependencies between those components, less dependencies with components in other collectives. Collective might possibly be up to 150 people. And I'm forgetting the name of the law. Someone can help me out there.
Oh, it's Dunbar.
Yeah, the Dunbar number, right. They haven't gone that high yet. I think so I heard a presentation from James Shore. Is that who you heard, Ed? Yeah, this was this was Agile 22. He gave that presentation. And I think he said the highest he knows of is like around 100 people in a collective.
Although the funny thing is, I don't know about everybody else on this call, but most of the time, the problem I run into is not a matter of like, how do we scale, or how do we do this work, or how do we break, not really, like that's what everybody thinks the problem is, but it's usually not having like a clear vision, or like knowing what the strategy is, or, like what the big, like what the actual goals are.
I would say at DHI, we're in some of the challenges that a large system presents, and the dependencies are a big issue. And if we could break down into cohorts organized around parts of the system that have an affinity and have a lot of dependencies, it would possibly improve how we work. He presented it at Agile 22 as like, this is about scaling. No, it's not about scaling. It's about not scaling, and it's about dealing with dependencies. And it was it was actually like, don't scale, right? Like reorganize, understand your system, reduce the coordination costs. And it was actually organized around the most important work, rather than stay static and try to, make it work, right? By adding people or adding teams or, dot, dot, dot.
Yeah, large scale Scrum says you scale by descaling, you simplify the organization and the problem rather than trying to patch things onto it. And Ed, you gave me time, so I'll share the screen again real quickly. I mentioned it, but this is Larman's laws of organizational behavior. There's 5 of them now. There were 4 when I originally learned this. Organizations are implicitly optimized to avoid changing the status quo middle and first level manager and specialist positions and power structures. As a corollary to that, any change initiative will be reduced to redefining or overloading the new terminology to mean basically the same as status quo. Nobody's ever seen that. No, so obviously these are already wrong. As a corollary to number 1, any change initiative will be derided as purist, theoretical, revolutionary religion, needing pragmatic customizations for local concerns. It's a deflection from addressing the weaknesses in manager specialist status quo. Number 4, this is the new one for me, so I'm going to look at this carefully. If after changing the change, some managers and specialists are still displaced, they become coaches, trainers for the change, frequently reinforcing 2 and 3 and creating the false impression the change has been done, deluding senior management and future change attempts, after which they become industry consultants. Ooh, I like that one. And then finally, in large orgs, culture follows structure. In startups, he says it goes the other way around. Structure follows the culture. So that's some of, I think, Ed, what you were getting at of why is this so hard? Why is it taking us, 50 years of knowing these things to change it? Well, think about what the reward structure of your company looks like. Think of, what's your HR system look like? How many titles do you have? I mean, we're rationalizing like a couple thousand at our company. All of that kind of stuff is there that implicitly continues you down the path of not doing these changes. I'll throw that link in the thing. Well, any other takeaways for people from tonight? Did I provide anything of value to anybody? Let's start there.
I might just say thank you very much. I thought I'd come off mute. It's my first time with the Kanban COP, and I'm business analyst by profession, but aspiring to be a Scrum Master. So I thought I'd just come in and just hear you out. It's been awesome. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you and welcome. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hopefully you'll come back.
Trevor, I liked how you brought up on the organizational design. It's really the key to a lot of these things that is overlooked. I mean, most of us, not all of us, because there's some vice presidents on this call. Look at it more of a team level. Now they probably have done that job in the past, but really that's what it comes down to, is that organizational, and it takes a while. And when you're small, you can adapt, you can be more flexible, but large 100,000 person organizations, there's so much entrenched ways of doing things. And I think Kim alluded to it earlier. It's just really, it's a difficult task to take on. And until I think there's a huge change in culture or management restructuring at some of these large companies, like I said, some people have to just retire. I don't think you're going to see huge changes. Now, you might see them on a smaller level, but yeah, I don't see it from a large organization level.
Yeah, when he talks about less and how long it might take you to do these transformations, he says expect years on this.
Can I just add, it might not be relevant to anyone who's, working at a company, but I, go into companies for their, I'll put it in air quotes, transformation. To me, it's like an evolution, right? If we really believe in continuous improvement, there is no end. But nowadays, a lot of people in companies think that Agile is a dirty 4-letter word, even though it's 5 letters. And, we've been doing Agile and it sucks. We've been doing Scrum and it sucks. And most of it is they don't really know what it is, because it was like, go read on the internet and start doing it kind of thing, right? But me and some of my colleagues have found is when you go into an organization, most likely it's that scenario. And also they're being voluntold they must be Agile, or they must be Scrum, or they must be, safe, or whatever it is. Which isn't Agile to dictate. A really great approach, though, is using the lean concept of like, what can we make better tomorrow? Whatever team, whatever level of the organization you're working on, and they can really grab onto that. And if they start getting some forward traction, instead of like Agile and here's what Scrum is and here's how you do it at this level and here's how you do it at this level. It's what are some of your problems and how can we move the needle a little bit for tomorrow or the next week or, that type of thing. And, oh, you have a bigger thing. Cool. We can work on putting together an experiment and okay, we'll run the experiment for 6 months, right? Because it's a bigger organizational thing, right? So I find this like really useful as an entry point in those scenarios. And there's still, like everyone's been saying, a lot of opportunity for improvement. Definitely at the more organizational, whether you want to say program and executive level, whatever you want to call it, there's still more opportunity there. So at least some like hope. I don't know the right word.
That's kind of why, Kim, I was searching for the lean wastes as part of this, because one of the thoughts I've had is it's easier for me to bring that list of, the 10, 12, 7, whatever, what version you pull, and just look at somebody and say, which of those have you had today? Which of those have you seen today? Now, what can we do about that? And guiding that maybe a little more that way. Any other comments? Thank you for the feedback.
Well, if there is anything else, I want to thank everybody for their time. But Trevor, thank you for the presentation. Our next public meetup is, I think it's in January. So that's the next one. Be on the lookout for other Agile Denver events and other special interest groups. It's on meetup.com. And hopefully we'll start getting those live events that I mentioned earlier. This particular COP, that's still being discussed, but we're addressing that for 2023, and we'll have more information at our next meetup, which will be at the beginning of 2023. Does anybody have anything more to add before we close out for the evening?
I just wanted to say thank you again for listening to me ramble. So thank you.
Good. All right. Thank you all. Have a great night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you. Thank
Thanks.
you, everyone.